This is no time to call elections, says political analyst and pollster Peter Wickham. Mr. Wickham, speaking on Voice of the Caribbean Radio's Let's Talks in Kitts and Nevis recently, said with the COVID-19 health concerns and precautions being practiced in St. Kitts and Nevis, it would make it difficult to host elections at this time.
It's difficult to achieve an election in the context of social distancing because it's not only lining up to vote, it's about campaigning. How can you canvass effectively while maintaining social distancing? How can you reach out and touch people, literally? You can't kiss and hug babies in an environment like this. I mean, goodness knows you can't. And even if you were able to visit people's houses, you can't effectively mobilize a campaign and meet people and press the flesh. You can't do it. I mean, pressing the flesh is essentially that. How can you do that in this current environment? So that's a campaign. Then when you come to the idea of actual voting and counting of votes, the scrutiny of that process will often require that people stand in close proximity to one another. The counting process requires that ballots be held aloft and allowed the scrutineers to be able to see the ballots and agree that the person who is tallying it has counted correctly. Having two people stand 6 feet apart, it can't work. And even if they're masked, I think that there's still a risk that is essentially difficult to achieve. So I disagree, and I think that in a sense, Dr. Douglas is not appreciating the medical and political implications of an election that will be held immediately. Maybe in a month, the situation will be such that you can say, mask the individuals and let's go to the polls. But it's not just lining up to vote, but it is also the process of scrutiny.
Opposition leader Dr. Denzel Douglas suggested that people could stand in line to vote in the same manner they do at the supermarkets to buy food.
The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is on the brink of a national election, and the objective must be to find the right balance between public safety and the people's right to choose their government.
But Mr. Wickham suggested that calling elections under COVID-19 with social distancing rules may not be as easy as it sounds. He also suggested that with the RRB International Airport being closed and international flights not being allowed into the country, an election without overseas voters may not benefit the Labour Party.
The overseas vote is clearly going to be affected by this. And in a sense, an election called soon will answer that question, enduring question, as to whether or not the overseas vote has any factor. If an election were called, let's say, within the next month, the likelihood of being able to get overseas voters in the volume that they were in before is quite low. Even if you were going to bring people via boats from neighboring islands and neighboring places like Anguilla and the BVI and so on, you have some challenges affecting that. I don't know whether the borders will be open to nationals who want to return. Technically speaking, it's impossible to stop a citizen from coming home. But the availability of charters that will be willing to take these people and so on is another factor. So my sense is that an election soon would probably help the incumbent, in that my reading of public opinion says that they have majority support within the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis. If they're able to isolate the nation of St. Kitts and Nevis and have an election among nationals, they're certainly going to be better off. And I think that when the opposition calls for an election immediately, the opposition is perhaps being a bit narrow-minded or nearsighted in not appreciating that their victory last time, in terms of the majority popular support that they were able to achieve, depended heavily on an overseas vote. And if that overseas vote is not available to them, I personally would think it puts them in a worse situation.
Parliament will be dissolved on the 14th of this month, with elections constitutionally due around the 11th of August 2020. Andre Huey, SKN Newsline.